Ready to unwrap a surprise from Consumer Cellular? Experience the gift of freedom with no contract, no hidden fees, and always free activation. Here comes the holiday surprise. From now till December 31st, new customers can enjoy their second month for free. To get this holiday offer, visit consumercellular.com or call 1-888-FREEDOM and use promo code PODCAST. Act before December 31st to get your second month on us. Use promo code PODCAST.
What would you like to see change in your life? And what is the biggest obstacle that you're facing now? I run a 5-week program at the Inner Knowing School for serious individuals who are ready to take the next step in their personal and professional lives. I will personally be coaching a small group of individuals, a number of practical tools and frameworks for creating an intuition practice and for self-mastery. You can find more at theinnerknowingschool.com. I have a master's certification in intuition medicine, and I've condensed 10 plus years of experience and research navigating how to harness your energy and intuition in an easy to access live curated course. Now, as someone who's helped countless creatives, entrepreneurs, and many who are just plain stuck, open doors of possibility they never thought existed, I've seen this strategy transform people's inner states and external reality. And the best part is that you'll skyrocket your output and unlock your creative genius. I'll work with you weekly live to overcome your limiting beliefs and show you how to manage your energy instead of your time. I'll teach you how to create clarity, processes, develop your intuition based on some of the top tools and frameworks that I've developed, and you'll get access to guided meditations and visualizations not available anywhere else. This method is so effective that even if you don't have that much time, or if you think that you might not be ready, this will work for you. You can check out the link in the show notes to join the waiting list, and you can check out what past clients had to say about the program. Wishing you all many blessings ahead. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Blood Moon Box, a monthly subscription box service for period pads and tampons to help support all humans who have a cycle for that time of the month, and no need to run to a store to mix and match period supplies that don't cater to the entire ebbs and flows of your cycle. There are 2 box options based on your cycle, light and medium, and then heavy. And in addition to the period products, you'll also receive PMS herbal teas, a candle, and some other items for your time of the month. You can reserve a box by navigating to bloodmoonbox.com. And bloodmoonbox.com is on a mission to destigmatize the idea of period blood. At Blood Moon Box, they believe that it is the time to honor the enchanting magic within every person who has a cycle. So join us in embracing the magic of your cycle with Blood Moon Box. Hi, my name is Yasmin Tarehi, and this is Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. On today's episode, I speak with Paul J. Mills, the Professor of Public Health and Family Medicine and Director of the Center of Excellence for Research and Training in Integrative Health at the University of California, San Diego. He's the former Chief of Behavioral Medicine and former Director of the Clinical Research Biomarker Lab at the University of California, San Diego. And his scientific career has been both active and diverse. He's got over 400 scientific publications in the fields of pharmacology, oncology, cardiology, space physiology with NASA, behavioral medicine, and integrative health. And he was part of the research team that published some of the earliest scientific research on meditation. And he has such an incredible background. He's got a new book out, which you can all check out. We'll leave in the show notes. We recently met at a conference, and I was so moved by his experience at the intersection of science and spirituality. So I'd love to welcome Paul to the show. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Yasmin. I'm so pleased that we've gotten together to have a conversation about all the things that are meaningful and important to both of us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Likewise. So, Paul, to kick it off, what does the science of spirituality mean to you? And what does it actually mean to be a spiritual scientist?
Yeah, thank you. I've been actually exploring that more and more over the last few years. You made a reference to my book, which examines the spiritual life of scientists. And for me, this whole domain of science beginning to move more and more into, let's say, spirituality, beginning to understand more the metaphysical and the mystical nature of human beings, of humanity, this to me is really the foundational purpose of science, to help explore the unknown really in terms of our own nature, and to help us in any way possible to begin to awaken to that nature so that we as people can begin to live it more fully. I mean, as you know, we're not there yet. Some people are farther ahead than others, so to speak, in terms of understanding the nature of their spiritual self. But the vast majority of people aren't. And if we can get science to more fully engage in this rather than discount it, which historically it has, we could have really a great acceleration in humanity's awakening. So, to be a spiritual scientist means to be helping science, to awaken science, and to utilize the tools of science to awaken humanity to their very self.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah. I mean, and where do you think, science has kind of diverged? Like, was science ever, looking at life from a spiritual lens or, and because I want to talk a little bit about the materialistic world, and how that also, I think, leads people to make certain conclusions about reality. And I know you have a chapter about materialism in your book.
Yeah, when I reflect on the nature of the Western scientific tradition, which we can trace back to, let's say, almost 5 centuries ago, and we think about characters such as Galileo and some of his colleagues, they were very religious people, and within that, some of them were also very spiritual. You can tell that from their writings, and they're the ones who began the Western scientific tradition anyway, and the nature of exploration. And they were trying to understand the nature of the universe. They saw the universe as really a manifestation of God. Many of them saw the universe as it being imbued with soul, with conscious soul force, so to speak. And that was their approach to science. So they were using it to help them understand the nature of this amazing manifestation that to them was a manifestation of God and also God, God itself. And it was really just over time, particularly the last, let's say, century or so, that it began to get more materialistic, and particularly, let's say, we could say again, the last couple of decades, where we have what you just mentioned, the materialistic sciences. We have something also called scientism, which is really the materialistic sciences in the most extreme form, which utterly and totally discount anything other than the material world as we know it. Things such as spirit, spiritual, that's all nonsense. And that's very unfortunate because many people utilize science as the kind of arbiter of truth. And whatever science says, then they say, okay, then that's true. And in that sense, the growth of the materialistic sciences have begun to have hampered over time people's kind of openness to the idea that they are more than just their mind and body. Unfortunately, that's been changing. At least there's a small group of people who've been pushing to get science back on track to be of service to us in our awakening rather than being a force that keeps us more asleep.
Mm, yeah, it's so fascinating, Paul, because I think, this pursuit of knowledge also, it's so interesting to me that there's so many camps that are just like, desiring to accumulate knowledge and understand knowledge, acquiring knowledge, but then not necessarily looking at how it can be applied in the day-to-day life and how it can make our lives as humans and as this one collective species better. So that has always been sort of interesting to me, in the background, that like, what's the sort of point of science if science is not going to actually really look at the collective, right? From the lens of the spirit. So I love that you've been focusing on this work. I'd love to talk a little bit about some of your experience. You were directing the Chopra Foundation's research program. I'm really curious, what are some of the maybe major studies or initiatives that you worked on, and why?
Yeah, the why of it, to answer that part first, the why of it was really back to this idea of helping to utilize science to awaken us to spirituality. And I look at all that work I've done with the Chopra Foundation. We've published over 25 scientific studies in a variety of domains, broadly in an area what's often called integrative medicine or integrative health. And we started that research in some basic ways, looking at the physiological effects of meditation, for example, on the level of genetics, on the level of heart rate variability. Then we moved into what's often called psychosocial health, the effects on depression, anxiety. Then we moved more into consciousness studies. What do intensive meditation programs do to people's experience of their very self, to their experience of consciousness, to their experience of their ego identity? And all of that was really new work in this realm of integrative medicine. And that was what we were trying to do. We were trying to get this conversation of consciousness itself, our foundational spiritual nature, back into scientific research, particularly back into research around health and well being, because it had been missing for a long time. And if you think about it, it's just utterly silly, because how can you really understand a person's sense of well being if you're not having a sense of their how are they in terms of their relationship to their spiritual self, and what kind of programs out there are helping to cultivate that so it can be recognized and understood? So that's what much of that work has been. We did research on gratitude together, which was really in many ways for me foundational as far as helping to awaken some of our innate gifts. I look at gratitude as a kind of soul force, as a gift on the soul level. And when we awaken that has transformational effects on body health and mental health and emotional health and our spiritual well-being.
Wow. And so I'd love to kind of dive a little bit into maybe one of the themes from the research, perhaps gratitude, and really double click on like, what was it that you found that is important for folks who are listening to kind of integrate into their own day-to-day life?
Yeah, happy to speak about that because I'm always enthusiastic about it, because the research, we went into that relatively innocently, meaning we knew that gratitude is important from our own lives. When I myself, for example, have brought gratitude into my consciousness, I've already knew how it influenced my sense of well-being. But we rolled out these research projects at the University of California, San Diego, and we were studying people who had cardiac disease, pretty severe cardiac disease. And we did a handful of studies. Some of them were more what's called cross-sectional research, more observational. And then we also did intervention studies where we took a group of patients and we randomized some of them. Now, the gratitude intervention that we specifically used is something many, many people already commonly do, and that is to keep a gratitude journal. So we instructed these patients to write down most days of the week a couple of things they felt grateful for on that particular day. Some patients would just write down a few words, some would write sentences, some would write paragraphs. So it just depends on the mood and the time in the day. And what we found after 2 months of these diaries being kept, it was very transformational. So let me mention some of the more psychosocial changes. I mentioned earlier benefits to depression and anxiety. People with severe heart disease often have more depression for a variety of reasons. Just energetically, the body's a bit depleted, but also just knowing they're carrying around a chronic disease. So that got better. Sleep got better. Sense of well-being got better. There's something called self-efficacy and a specific focus of that in cardiology, which is the person's confidence that they're able to take care of themselves in terms of whatever regimen they're on, whatever the drugs are, the exercise and diet. Gratitude helps support that sense of self-efficacy and confidence that they could really take care of themselves the rest of their lives and manage this disease. And importantly, we drew blood samples from all the patients. It's already well known that cardiac diseases are associated with a lot of inflammation. There's biomarkers of the heart itself. There are biomarkers just generalized within the blood, circulating blood. And we found these biomarkers went down on average almost 25%, which is completely unheard of in literature. Even when
Wow.
people start doing their exercise and these the drugs, the pharmaceutical agents, don't ever touch this degree of inflammation. So gratitude is rather miraculous in that sense. And then finally, we measured their cardiac function itself, something called heart rate variability, and that improved. And it improved specifically when they would sit down and they would just be writing into their journal. And of course, finally, as you might imagine, their sense of gratitude changed quite a bit in the literature, and we often call it having an attitude of gratitude. And the more you practice gratitude, it becomes more part of your consciousness and your mindset, and you just carry it around.
Wow.
And it's just it's a beautiful practice, and it just helps people feel more connected to themselves and also the world around them, the environment around them. It's a very embracing phenomenon, as I suspect you know from your own experience of gratitude.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so impressed by some of the kind of biological markers that improved with gratitude, and like I can energetically feel that with the moments in my life where I was really dedicated to, doing like a 5-minute gratitude journal, or really, there was a period in my life where I would just sit and count all my blessings and set a timer for 10 minutes. And I just loved how I felt in my body after that. And I don't do it anymore, but I'm now like realizing, oh, maybe I should go back and do that, because what a powerful reminder. And it's so simple, right? It's so accessible. Anyone can do it. It's free, right? Which,
All those, yes.
yeah, okay. So for those folks who are listening, write up a gratitude list. We'd love to hear from you. What are you grateful for? And see how that changes your your physiology.
And it's powerful. I'd like to add one anecdotal story around this. So we had published a couple of these findings, and then I was I mentioned earlier, University of California, San Diego. And in San Diego, there's a big military base and there's a Navy hospital. And we hosted a conference there in integrative medicine, and I gave a talk, and Deepak Chopra gave a talk, amongst others. And I gave a talk on this gratitude work. And a couple of the physicians there got in line to ask me a question. And they shared with me that they had heard and read about this research on public radio some months earlier. And they began recommending gratitude to their own patients there at the Naval Hospital. And they were sharing with me how transformative it had been for them. So, as you just said, this is something anyone can do. It's easy, it's free, as you said, and it's just a transformative, powerful faculty. And again, for me, it's us starting to engage our soul forces more. That's one way I look at it, and it's transformative.
Amazing, amazing. So I want to actually, before we dive in, because I think that we've brought up the soul and the spirit and a number of times in this conversation. And I think for a lot of people who are listening who may not understand what that means, right? Like, what does it mean to have a soul? What does it mean to have a spirit? So I always ask, my guests to explain, like, what does it mean to you, to kind of have a soul and to have a connection with spirit? Like, what do those words mean to you? I think it just helps people who are listening kind of clarify in their minds what that experience might feel like if they've never really tapped into it.
Yeah, okay, I'll do my best, because that's a tough question. I'll start with the experience that most people have in the world, and that is the experience of being a person, of being a personality, of constantly having the experience of a variety of thoughts going through their mind, emotions going through their whole feeling body, and so forth. And that's typically the extent of our experience in the world as a subjective experience, as an I-ness, let's say. And for me, what soul is our identity way beyond this ongoing experience of feeling that we are a person. And of course, there's much philosophic and meditation literature out there, mystical literature, where people do wake up to an sense of self that is beyond the personality. And when that happens, there's always a sense of greater joy, expansiveness of consciousness, a sense of more connectedness with all things versus the typical of experience of a person as personality is separation. I am here, you are there. I exist in this body, you exist over there in that body. The world separate from me, on, separation and duality. But really, that's not a truth in terms of our foundational existence as soul, as a spiritual being, which is beyond just the dimension that we typically experience. This earthly, sometimes called third dimension, this world of matter that the physical sciences typically examine and operate in. So how's that as an
Yes.
answer?
Yeah. That's perfect. That's perfect. That's amazing. It's a really difficult question. So I think it's really great to get different perspectives on what that experience feels like to each person. So yeah, that's great. So Paul, I want to talk a little bit about some of the leading scientists that you may be looking up to now or even previously in your journey, and why. Like, who are the people that you're paying attention to and that have inspired you when it comes to the science of spirituality?
Okay, I'm glad you added that part at the end because that's really where my consciousness has been lately. Historically, when I was deep more in the biomedical sciences, then the scientists I looked up so much to were more those in a field called psychoneuroimmunology or behavioral medicine or biochemistry and pharmacology. But yes, these days, my orientation has been more towards scientists who have been cultivating their own spiritual life in the context of their scientific work. And those are the folks I interviewed for my book, the book that we made reference to earlier. I interviewed over 30 scientists, mainly from the United States, but also outside of the United States. Who are some of the ones I admire very much? Well, honestly, all of them, but I could do a shout out for a couple. One of them, his name's Rudy Tanzi. He's a neuroscientist at Harvard. And one of the reasons I just love and admire Rudy so much is that he's so brilliant. He's made leading edge discoveries as far as brain health, as far as Alzheimer's disease. He's discovered some of the genes of Alzheimer's, on and on. But he has been very open and willing to speak about his spiritual experiences. He clearly did in the book. He's written some other books on his own. He's given lectures around this. And when you have somebody at his level, another one of the scientists is Neil Thies, a friend of mine, and Tiffany's, whom you know. He's at New York University. These are very top tier people, and they're willing to go out and speak about this level of spirituality, of the level of the human soul. They've got massive scientific creds, and they're willing to speak about it. And this, to me, helps loosen up some of the objectivity or the sense that, oh, this is all woo-woo science, when you get people who are really successful on the scientific side speaking about this.
Mm.
Another colleague of mine, Cassie Veaton, she's a professor at the University of California, San Diego, my institution. She's also a former president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which devoted itself to the study of consciousness and all the mysteries around being a human being and who we are and our place in the universe. So those are just a few, but I really admire many, and particularly the ones in the book who were willing to share with me their mystical experiences, their metaphysical experiences, even though at times that can be an adverse thing to do for a scientist as far as potentially hurting their reputation.
Right.
And therefore, if that happens, that could influence your ability to get grants, to get invitations to speak at conferences, to get your papers published.
That's so wild. Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
wild. It's so wild that we're still living in that kind of paradigm. But I've heard of Cassie's name before, and definitely we interviewed someone from the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So thank you for mentioning these wonderful folks. And for people listening, you can check them out and maybe do your own Googling and due diligence on some of their work. So, Paul, I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the opening of your book, in which you speak about this galactic alignment. Why did you decide to start your book off with this concept, and why is understanding this really important to your work?
Hmm. That really is a fabulous question, and there's so many dimensions to it. So how best to approach that? I'll begin by, of course, I'm not an astronomer, but the galactic alignment, as far as a phenomenon, is something that occurs every 26,000 years here on our Earth. And it's when our Earth and Sun and our immediate galaxy, as it's rotating around the galactic center, the center of the Milky Way, it comes into a certain position in relation to the galactic center. It's called the galactic plane. And when it's in the galactic plane, you can imagine, if you're walking into a forest and suddenly there's a long opening between you and the very center of the forest and you can see in the middle, that's what this is, where the Earth suddenly has a clear shot into the galactic center with nothing else in the way. There's no other galaxies in the way. There's no other, solar systems and so forth, planet, whatever it might be. And I opened the book because with that particular experience, because it was very transformative to me. It was more of a spiritual experience I had some years ago around the time of this galactic alignment phenomenon. And that inspired me actually to write the book. And you read through this, and as a nutshell for the listeners, it was an experience where I had a vision of what the future of the Earth and the future of humanity is. And it's a beautiful future that will come to pass. It's probably going to be some rough road between now and then, but it was beautiful. And when I had that vision and this vast cosmic being shared with me this vision of what the future of humanity will be, for me, it raised the question of, well, what have I been doing as a scientist, as a person, to help support the coming of this future event? Has my scientific work been helpful? Am I impeding, this future event? Am I slowing it down? And I began to really soul search around this question. And as I soul searched for myself and began to want to understand the science that I do, how is it helping or hindering this future phenomenon and our ability to get there? I then began to wonder, well, what about other scientists? What kind of experiences are they having around their own spiritual nature now and into the future? And that was the inspiration of the book. And I thought, well, I'm just going to lay it out right at the get-go. And that's why I start the book with the experience. Just lay it out there. And again, me as a scientist, you mentioned I've been successful as a scientist. 400 publications is a lot out there. And I've had a very stalwart kind of reputation as a scientist. And, here it is. So we'll see how that's influenced my reputation in some areas, some scientists. It could have been the end of it. I don't know, but it's okay. I was willing to take that step because I feel it was very, very important.
Yeah. What has been the reaction to your book so far? And, what's kind of come up for people?
Yeah, it's been very encouraging. There are many dimensions to the book. In addition to the you mentioned the chapter that I wrote on just the materialistic sciences and where we need to go to transform science. The bulk of the book are me having conversations with other scientists about their spiritual experiences and having a narrative around that, a story. And within that, I also share my own experiences where relevant. And I've gotten just beautiful emails and messages from people around the world who have read the book, and it's been very liberating for them. Whether they're a scientist themselves and they've been feeling stuck in the closet about not speaking about these experiences, or if they're a person who haven't had many of them, but they've thought they wanted to pursue them, but they thought it might be contraindicated because they're a scientist, on and on and on. And in that sense, it's been kind of liberating for people. And that to me is extremely satisfying.
Yeah, amazing. I bet for folks who feel the same way, but maybe are scared to share this on a public platform, right? And I think that you have so much credibility that you can maybe afford to take more risk, which is amazing. And I want to understand what attracted you to this space. Can you talk to us about your journey, how you got here, 400 publications, dedicating so much of your life to this work? Did you always feel this way, or was there some event that kind of pushed you into this space?
Yeah. There was an event, and I'll add one other thing about the book and feedback. I was notified a few weeks ago my book got what's called a Gold Nautilus Award in the area of science and cosmology. And that's an area of this particular book award system that's highly relevant to the message of my book. And this is an area that has to do with helping humanity understand our own nature and our nature in relation to the cosmos. And that to me was very rewarding, as has been feedback from people around the world sharing how it's been helpful and liberating for them. So I hope the award, if anything, just encourages more people to get the book and read it and see how it might help them as well.
Oh, that's
So,
amazing. Really
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So as far as my own beginning, I was in high school growing up in the country of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and a friend suggested I learn meditation. I'd never heard of it. I was in my junior year, and I said, "Yeah, sure, that sounds interesting." I went out, I attended an introductory lecture, I learned to meditate. And some months into having learned meditation, I had what's called a classic out of body experience. I was sitting outside under a tree in a field, sat down, closed my eyes, began my mantra, and then poof, before I knew it, I was out of my body. I was up in the tree, looking down at myself, meditating, all the details you've heard about such things. And it was remarkable. It was surprising. It was beautiful. I'd never heard of such a thing. When I finally got back into my body, I was like, what? What was that? I'd grown up in Catholicism. I'd never heard of such a thing. I began to read literature as much as I could get my hands on. Mostly it was Eastern literature that began to speak about these things. And that's what really led me to be a scientist. I thought, wow, there's more to me than I realized. There's the me, Paul, that I'd always known. And then there was another me that was vast in consciousness and at peace continuously and a vast quietness. And the question was, well, who's the real me or both me? And that's what really led me into science. So I started off studying meditation, and I've been doing more of that in the recent years, as we've spoken about with the Chopra group. And that's what got me into science. It's been a beautiful journey. I got my creds in some of the deeper levels of science, as I mentioned, pharmacology, biochemistry, just trying to understand the body, the nature of the mind and consciousness. And it's been very satisfying as a career. And I would say that I got where I wanted to be as far as what science could do to help me understand the nature of my own self.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, lucky you that you got introduced to this world so young and so early. What a dream, really. It's amazing. Really, really amazing. And, looking back, because you've been in this space now for so long, Paul, what has really changed, since you started working in this field? And how has your kind of point of view evolved over time?
Yeah. Well, as far as the space, well, I could relate to you a story when I was conducting research on meditation. This was in the, say, mid to late 1970s. And I had gathered enough data to make a presentation at a scientific conference. And this was, I can't remember, it was either the Society for Neuroscience or it was some kind of electrophysiology conference. And I was giving my presentation, and this was in what's called a poster format, not a talk. And somebody came up and they were looking at my poster and the graphs and the title, and they said, "These are really interesting graphs, but excuse me, but what is meditation?" And I was so taken aback because I had been practicing already for a few years. It was normal. But then I realized, wow, I've been in a little bit of a bubble because many people didn't know about meditation back then. Now it's ubiquitous. It's kind of a household word. At least while I was living in California, there's yoga studios all over the place. So things have very much opened up to ideas in our cultures around yoga, meditation, self-transformation, consciousness development, consciousness expansion. So in that sense, it's been very satisfying because as a culture, cultures have opened up to begin to take more of this in about our potential in the realms of consciousness and who are we really and what can I learn about myself beyond what I used to think was just me.
Mm. Wow. What about, in terms of why you think these subjects are important?
Mm.
What's your perspective on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it gets down to this very, very foundational question of who are we really as human beings?
Mm.
That the old adage, know thyself. What does that really mean? Does that mean know your thoughts and know your feelings and know your family history? No. It really means to do the work and have the inspiration to do some archaeological digging within your own mind and consciousness to uncover your really your foundational existence beyond and including ourselves as a human being. That's why it's important. So many people around the world today, particularly the United States, so many people are on antidepressants, anxiolytics, and on and on. People don't know themselves. They've just been stuck in a
Mm.
world of experience, and much of that experience has gotten less and less a sense of safety, a sense of what's predictable and known, and that's just not living a full life as it could be. And when people start getting on journeys through whatever mechanism, yes, it could be meditation, it could be contemplative prayer, it could be singing, chanting. There's so many ways that we as human beings can begin to open up our inner space, access to that space. And that's where the I-ness beyond the personality resides. And that's some of the ways where we get to discover that. And then as that begins to awaken within us, that's when life transforms. We've already spoken about it in terms of gratitude and the beauty as a practice that gratitude can do to awaken our spirit. And there are many other practices too, like that. That's why it's important. It's people awakening to their very nature and really foundationally to love and compassion.
Mm. Yes, yes, I could not agree more. I really appreciate that. And, you speak about numbing out and antidepressants and it's really interesting how overprescribed things are. And also how many people are just desiring to numb out on everything, right? On life. And I agree. There's like this inner gold, within us that if we don't sit with it and really discover it, then life sort of just feels a little dull. And yeah, and so I really appreciate that. I really do. And Paul, what sort of things have surprised you the most on this journey?
Ah, that's a good one. Well, a couple things. One, those findings from the gratitude research were really surprising. And you made reference yourself to the effects on the biology, the immunology, the change in the actual functioning of the heart itself. That's powerful medicine. The other surprises had to do with when I began my interviews for the book. I have been kind of this closet spiritual person through my scientific career. And I never shared these things with people. I would go to scientific conferences around the world, my own colleagues at the university. I never spoke about these things, any of the metaphysical and mystical experiences I had. I didn't see any way to do it. And as I began to interview other scientists for the book, I realized there are many of us like this, but all of us have been keeping it all in the closet for the same reasons I was doing. But when they were given the opportunity to speak about it, it was so beautiful,
Mm.
Yasmin, to hear these experiences was so intimate. And I was grateful that they were willing to share it. So that surprised me. The fact that this is really common, and it's common beyond scientists too. But most folks don't speak about it. Even outside of science, I've had friends who have had metaphysical experiences, and they've gone to their pastor or the rabbi, and they want to share these things, and there's no reception for it. Because typically in religious traditions, if you begin to speak about this, people will kind of scratch their head and look at you like, well, you might want to go speak to a psychiatrist about this. And this is a very sad state of affairs, but this is not uncommon. So the
Right.
more that we are all willing to share the reality of our inner lives, that helps it open up and find encouragement for more and more people to share it.
Mm.
And many, many people do say they're religious and spiritual, but there's just a disconnect with a kind of acceptance at a social level to really go there. But
Mm.
that's changing. fortunately.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It really, for me, I feel like it comes down to like that deeper connection to self, right? And I
Yeah.
feel like religion has been kind of there to help people connect with themselves through a third party. And
Yeah.
now, right?
Yeah, the third party system.
The
Yeah.
third party system. And now I think there's a lot of tools to connect with yourself through other modalities and other means, right? You don't necessarily even need a third party. It's like giving you the sort of power to connect deeply to the universe, whatever you want to call God, Gaia, Mother Earth.
Yes, that's beautiful. And I want to add something about that, we were just speaking a moment ago about the rates of depression and anxiety. And then you mentioned this idea, yeah, we don't need these third parties anymore. I think what's going on is that it gets back to the idea of this galactic center experience. There's a lot of movement and support from the spiritual world for the spiritual awakening of humanity. Many people speak about this now. Many people are having experiences around these. I don't know how else to say it. Changes in vibration and support for people to awaken. And with this almost like a pressure that's building. And if people are not willing to take a look at that, that can cause even more depression and anxiety, because you've got these inner forces coming in on a soul level that the person doesn't know what to do with. So they either ignore it or push it down. That creates more inner conflict. And I'm only mentioning that because if there are listeners who are having some awareness around this for themselves, to really to take confidence and find the courage to begin to look at these impulses within themselves in an honest way, see what the messages are, go find help and support like-minded people to speak about them, and find ways to get in touch with what is asking to be awakened within them.
Amazing. Yes. And it takes like courage really to go into that world. I think a lot of folks are scared, or there's fear associated with it.
Yeah, it does. It does take courage, because it's a transformation. We spoke earlier about personality. Most people feel themselves to be that thing only. But if there are other forces coming along that say, you know what, you're more than that, and I want you to wake up to this part of yourself now, or this dimension, it can be a little scary,
Yes, yeah.
because it's taking us out of the safety of what's been known and asking us to venture into the unknown.
Yes, yeah. So, Paul, what do you want to tell our listeners about their wellness and their well-being? Like, what's your main takeaway and call to action?
Call to action. Well, as far as you just mentioned well-being, I would say I would advocate, and this is along the lines of what we just spoke about, people to develop their own inner physician, their inner guidance. Begin to rely and have confidence in intuition, that gut feeling. We all have so much guidance available to us all the time, but most of our cultures, we're not told how to cultivate that. And we might have a little blip of an impulse, and then we ignore it and we turn away from it. But find ways to have confidence in listening to that guidance. And as you begin to do that, and there are books and courses out there how to do that, and to begin to have confidence and cultivate that, because that's the way to be on the proper path of your own journey, and not to be following what another person's telling you to do, or an institution's telling you to do, or an organization. You are your own sovereign being. Do the work to come into that, and then begin to live that way. And that, to me, is how we ultimately develop well-being, because we're living from within our own self and our own guidance, rather than what others and society at large might be telling us to do, that, well, let's say, often or not necessarily is the best thing for you to do.
Fascinating. Yes, amazing. Well, call to action: become your own healer, become your own inner physician, and really, yeah, tap into your own inner power. I really love that, Paul. It's amazing. And Paul, where can people find you? Are there any resources that you can point folks to in order to learn more about you and your new book, and just how to stay in touch with what you're up to?
Yeah. Let's see, a couple of things. One, my wife, Tiffany Barsotti. Tiffany and I have a website. It's called healandthrive.com, healandthrive.com. And you could learn more about me and Tiffany on the website. There's also a spot on the website where if people want to get a few free chapters from my book, they can just go to the website, and I think they enter their email, and then you can download portions of the book to get a sense of it if it's something you wanted to ultimately buy and have the whole thing or not to read. Of course, I have a website at the University of California, San Diego. That's more oriented towards my academic work, and that's easy to find. Just search Paul J. Mills, University of California, San Diego, and I would pop up.
Amazing, amazing, Paul. Thank you so much. We'll include the link in the show notes so that people can access it, and you can also find it online. And the book is amazing. So for folks who are thinking about the book, I mean, obviously the award is incredibly prestigious, and so it's an incredible book. So please pick it up. Paul, thank you so much for your time. This was such a lovely conversation. I really, really appreciated learning from you and all your wisdom over the years.
You are most welcome, Yasmin. I'm pleased we finally had a time to get together. I remember when we met in Sedona, I appreciated our conversations, and then this idea came up to have this particular conversation. And it's been very thought-provoking and just stirred a lot of enthusiasm in me for the work I've been doing. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. Amazing. Well, so for our audience, thanks for joining and for listening. In this episode, we learned about the science of spirituality with Paul J. Mills, and you can tune in to Gateways to Awakening, where we host one-on-one conversations with leading experts in wellness, well-being, and spirituality. Thanks again.